Welcome to episode 18 of the Haxton Knits podcast. My name is Deanna and I'm an American living in Okinawa, Japan. As always, you guys can find me on Instagram and Ravelry as Haxton Knits. This is a podcast mainly about knitting. I am a master knitter. I am also a hobbyist home brewer, weaver, spinner, crafter of all sorts. So if that's your jam, stick around. We'll show you a little bit of life here in Okinawa. Let's get started. You guys, you can see we're in a new location here in my home. It's now that time of year where I switch back to day shift. I do this just about every 3 months, flipping back and forth between days and nights. And in night shift, I definitely am downstairs under the bright LED lights in my computer room just so you can see my face. But since it's now daytime and I have better light in the rest of my house, I can just kind of move around a little bit more freely. I hope that you guys aren't hearing too much noise. This particular room gets very hot. It's not attached to my house. It's sort of above the garage, and I tried really hard to use no air conditioning while I was setting up, and it wasn't going to happen. Even just kind of sitting against this giant window is making me sweat. So we're just going to go with the air conditioner. I hope it's not too bothersome. Give me some feedback if it really drives you crazy, and we'll see what we can do for future episodes. Also, because this room is a little bit closer to the street, you will probably hear some of the traffic noise. This is a big city, so it's not a quiet place, but I just couldn't resist. So this particular window in my house, it looks onto a kind of private courtyard for my home. It's an interesting kind of architectural thing here in Japan, where the houses tend to be a small lot, and they will build the whole way around the whole lot, and then if there is a little bit of private space, it'll be inside there where no one else can see it. And so it's a lovely little feature in our home, and I just love that I can now share some of this greenery and nice view with you, my viewers. As far as other announcements go, the Challenge Yourself Make-Along is still happening. It will be ending on the 31st of December. So you still have a few more weeks to get involved. If you are interested, pop on over to my Ravelry group. Of course, I am wearing my contribution to this particular make-along right now, and I talked extensively about this in my last episode, so you guys can pop over to that episode if you want more details. I feel like I've been wearing this particular shirt, I think the last 3 episodes in a row. I've just been wearing it like crazy because I really do want to wear all my knitwear, but it is crazy hot right now, and this is about the lightest thing that I own. So anyway, let's move on to my finished objects. My finished object contributions this week are pretty small, and viewers of my channel will already recognize them. These are the teeny tot hats that I've been working on. I mentioned I had many pregnant coworkers and that I was going to knit some of these for all of them. My coworkers are now all at the point where they're just about to have babies, so I should be giving them out. I'm having a hard time giving them out. I just feel like nobody's gonna like them. This is a personal self-esteem sort of thingy happening here, but I just kind of feel like nobody's gonna really like or appreciate hand knit hats from people. And then I feel like, well, if I am gonna give them that, I should probably give them a gift too, you know, to make up the value of being more significant, which is really, it's devaluing my own work. It's devaluating the thought that went behind it. I should just suck it up and give it to them. Part of me is tempted to not, and just maybe like donate it to a local nursery or something. But they will. These will probably end up going to my coworkers. This is a very beginner-friendly pattern if you've never worked it before. It's literally a garter stitch square that you fold in half and seam up the sides, and then you'll have to buy yourself a little pom-pom maker, or look up, there's a lot of YouTube videos out there about how to make pom-poms without a pom-pom maker. And these are knit in Wister Pop, which is just a very fun yarn with little bitty pom-poms of color that pop out of these. So fun yarn for babies. I don't have to talk about these on this show ever again. Cheers, guys. I do have a lot of whips this week, including some alternate crafts. So alter crafts this week. So I've got some weaving, I'm still working on my cross stitch, and we have a brew day. So I'll tell you all about what is brewing in my brew kettle coming up next. I want to start things off with a project from the Knits in Translation knit along. This bag you are all familiar with now, but if you are not familiar with it, go over to my playlist of sewing tutorials and you'll find a pattern for it. Not mine, but bag pattern. I have been working on the page 4 pullover, which I will link below because it's a Japanese pattern. It might be hard for you to find if you're searching for it on Ravelry. As part of that Knits in Translation knit along. And last week when I talked to you, I had just finished the first half, this guy, and realized that I was one skein short and that I wasn't going to be able to finish the second half of it. I kept popping back into my local craft store and the color's not coming in. So I had to get creative. And so what I decided to do was add some contrast color to squeeze one extra ball of yarn into this pattern. So this is knit side to side lengthwise. So this is my original cast on edge. You knit a little section of ribbing. This light in this room may not be as great as I thought it was for showing these things off, but you knit some ribbing all the way across and then knit another section of ribbing, and ultimately you will sew up this edge and it will become part of your sleeve and sleeve cap. And so what I did was just pull back the ribbing at the bind off edge, salvage that extra bit of gold yarn to use for for the back side of this pattern, and then pick up with this darker color. My intention is I'll go ahead and knit the whole back piece that way too, and then what I'll have to do here is just cut my yarn. So I'll pick up stitches along here, cut and unravel one row, and then I'll have this much yarn to salvage to use for the back of the other side if I need to. I'm going to do it either way, but I don't know if I'm going to need that much yarn. And I did want to talk a little bit about this because there's a technique I picked up pretty late in my knitting career. Some of you probably already know this, but I did not. And that is dealing with the transition when you change colors around ribbing, or basically around any area that has reverse stockinette. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Something happens when you are transitioning from a ribbing section of knit purl to another section, or specifically a reverse stockinette stitch fabric to another section. So when you add that new color in, let's see if I can make this visible. Gosh, this is not the best light for this, but what you will see is that in the spots where you are purling, the new color kind of shows through. Let's see if maybe you can see this better here. This is kind of exaggerated because I'm on the wrong side, but the old color, so the gold is the old color, you start working with the new color and you get these little blips of the old color that show through on the front side. There, you can see them there. And it just kind of makes an uneven, I think a little bit untidy edge. This fabric, it doesn't show it off too starkly. This is a tweedy fabric, and so it does kind of all blend in. But if you want to hide that, the way you do is the first row of the new color, work all your stitches in knit. So anywhere there's supposed to be a purl stitch, work a knit stitch. And you would think, well, that's just going to screw up your pattern. But what actually happens is it kind of disappears. It falls to the kind of depresses back and disappears a little bit. And I'll show you what I mean here. So this section here, what I did was I was working knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2. And then this is the right side of the work. So it's a reverse stockinette stitch, right side of the work. But the first row, I knit all the gold in knit stitches. And if I pull this open, in this light, you're not going to be able to see it at all, but the stitches, the knit stitches are right here, and they just kind of disappear, and it makes a nicer, straighter, flatter edge. This is the wrong side of my work here, so you can see all those blebs that would have been showing to the front are on the back side of the work now. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to eliminate in this sample here where I didn't do that. So that's just kind of a neat little trick to try and play with. I did it here too, just so you can see on this row here. So with this row, in the last example, we were kind of looking at it this way, and I was knitting in the dark color, and then my first row I knit in gold in all knit stitches. In this example, I was coming from this direction. So I had just finished a gold row, and my first row of ribbing, instead of doing ribbing, I just did all knit stitches. I'll try to take some better pictures of this so I can pop them in for you guys, but that just helps clean up that line so that you don't get kind of a messy transition at the point where you change colors. So tip, hopefully that helps somebody out there, because it helped me when I discovered it. I was just kind of like, oh, interesting. I never even would have thought to try and look that up. So let's move on to my next whip. I know last week I talked a lot about the Portage cardigan. I did get some work done on that. So same bag, different fabric. You guys are familiar with these bags by now. This is my progress so far. Oh, let's show it to you so you can see it. So I have separated for the sleeves and got a good portion of the back done. I was starting to get nervous that this was going to be way too small, so I did take it off the needles, put it on some waste yarn, and just do a kind of quick and dirty block. I just soaked it in some water for a little while and then laid it flat to dry. It opened up a lot. Like, this fabric, you can see, is really pretty see-through now. I do have a confession to make that I did not do a gauge swatch for this pattern, which isn't really like me. I do tend to do gauge swatches. I don't know why I didn't. I think I was already so thrown off about the yarn, which I talked about in my previous episode, how I got 4 skeins that looked like this and 3 skeins that looked like this, totally different color. So I just was like, screw it, and cast on and saw where it went. So what I did was I knit the 12 inches that they said to knit before starting the ribbing for the body, and then my plan is to just go ahead and knit the sleeves from there, and we'll see how far I can make my gold skein stretch. And then once that's all done, I'm going to do the cuffs and the button band in that other color. So a little bit of progress on this guy. I am loving the way the color is working up. My knitting mojo's been low. It's been low. It's hot. You guys get it. It's hot. So it hasn't been getting a whole lot of love. My other projects have been getting more love. I did warp my loom for the Cozy Alpaca poncho. I talked to you about this before, but this is a product from Gist Yarn. I think that's how you say it, G-I-S-T, Gist Yarn. It was a kit that I bought of, it came with 3 cones of alpaca yarn in this lovely misty gray color and a beautiful bright sort of indigo blue. What do I want to say about this? I am realizing that certain materials are not beginner-friendly materials for weaving. So this is my first time using anything other than my own hand spun, and all my hand spun is wool. And so I warped with this alpaca, and boy, did it make it. First of all, it's a really big warp. You warp, I think it's 550 yards, because they have you warp up enough to do 2 pieces of this giant poncho. And in the process of like taking my loom up, everything just got super tangled. I was doing it with my husband, and usually I warp my loom by myself, so I was excited to have a helper, and we just made a huge tangle, huge mess. And as I am weaving, I'm having an awful time with my selvages, which is new for me. I did buy a temple. Do you guys know what a temple is? Hold on. So here's my loom. It is not feasible in any way to weave with my kittens. They are in the loom, under the loom, batting things around, chasing strings. I think all of you can understand that. But loom here, progress. I have literally only this much progress done. And as you can see, my selvages are a little bit wonky. They're not terrible, but they're not as good as I can do them. And I blame that entirely on the yarn. The yarn is, I'm scared to tighten up my loom tight enough because I think I'm gonna break the yarn, but then it sticks to itself. So when I, lift my, oh gosh, weaving terms. I don't have weaving terms, but when you lift your reed up so that your shed separates, opens and closes, they don't, they all stick together. And so I'm like constantly kind of fighting them up and down, trying to make a passable weaving pattern. So I feel like normally my weaving just kind of flies off the loom, everything goes smoothly and beautifully, and I'm done before I know it. This one's gonna take a while. One, because I'm fighting with the yarn, and two, because I'm fighting with my kittens who are fighting with my yarn. So we'll see how long that takes. If you are a weaver and have used alpaca yarn and have tips or tricks for someone who's new at this, I would love to hear them. Like I said, I bought a temple. So this is a temple. I've never used one of these before, but they look like little death machines with nails in the ends. And the idea is that they kind of help prevent you from having draw in on your loom as you weave, so you get your full size. This particular pattern called for a 17.5 inch loom, and I only have a 16 inch loom. So of course, what did I do? I warped it into every single hole, eye, dent, whatever they're called, in the loom. And that's not maybe the best decision because now my edges are, I don't know, weird. Anyway, I am not an expert weaver, as we have just figured out. So that will be an ongoing project for me that hopefully I will finish one day. Moving on to the cross stitching. I didn't anticipate having any cross stitching for you, but I do because it's hot, so I've been working on it. I actually put a pretty significant dent into this. If you guys remember from last week, I only had basically here down finished, so I did all of this section here and I've started to fill in here. So making some progress. My husband looked at that and said, "Oh, you're almost done." And then I reminded him that I have the whole other half of this pattern to go yet. So ongoing forever. One day I will finish this, but it's a beautiful project, reminding me of cold, cold weather when I am in the tropical heat. All right, let's talk about brew day. So this is, I feel like this really fits nicely into the works in progress section because it is a work in progress. Like I did my brew day, but everything is still fermenting. And so it'll be a few weeks until I get to finish up this particular project. But I decided to go a little bit easy. Sometimes I like to create my own recipes or try to adapt other people's recipes when it comes to brewing, but I didn't want to think about it so much. So I went ahead and bought a kit. So I bought an all grain kit from Great Fermentations. Great Fermentations is a company that I like to use because they ship at a reasonable cost out to Okinawa. I don't necessarily always ship from abroad. I'm familiar with the US companies because I've used them when I was living in the US. I do use a Japanese company called Advanced Brewing, which is up on the mainland. They have great products. They don't necessarily have the all grain stuff, so they'll have extract kits and things like that. They have a couple of brew in the bag kits that you can buy, but it's a limited variety compared to what you can get in the US. So this kit, it was the Mac Daddy Scotch Ale kit, and they offer it in an all grain, they offer it in a partial mash, and I think they offer it in an extract. And being a somewhat newbie brewer, they had some interesting suggestions. So they suggest that you take, first of all, your first gallon off of your wort that you pull off your wort and boil it down. So reduce it by half. So what I did was I took that 1 gallon out of my brewing system. You guys know I have the Anvil Foundry brewing system that I use. Would never ever trade it in. Love the system. But I pulled the first gallon off, put it on the stove, and let that one reduce down. So cook down to about half, and then returned it back in. As a new brewer, I didn't know, am I supposed to replace the water volume? You know, I reduced by half, so, you know, half a gallon. But I didn't replace it. I just threw that half gallon back in to the boil, sort of towards the end of the boil. I was doing them simultaneously, so I pulled off that 1 gallon, started the boil on the system while I, you know, reduced down on my stovetop. Gosh, I'm rambling a little bit. Another one of the suggestions that they make is that you ferment at a lower temperature for a longer period of time. And so again, I'm a newbie brewer. I don't know if, basically I just took them at their word. I'm brewing, they said between 60 and 65. So I set up my refrigerator. I have a kegerator, which I will show you in the video, and an Inkbird temperature control system. And so that system, you can plug in the fridge to the cooling port, and I have a sort of heated fermentation tank blanket that I tape around my glass carboy. And so you can control your temperature that way. So I decided to split the difference and set that to 63 degrees Fahrenheit. And the plan is to ferment for 3 weeks. So I took a look. Day 1 and 2, there was like great yeast activity, maybe not as vigorous as some of my previous brews, but there was definitely activity happening. And now everything seems to have settled down. I am wondering if the colder temperature is the reason. You know, the yeast is just not quite as vigorous and active, but hopefully still doing their job in the background. They are often working when we can't see them working. So yeah, we'll see what we get. I did take an initial gravity, and if things turn out right, I think we're aiming for about a 6.5% alcohol by volume. I also bought a extract kit, which I'm gonna save for later. It's a spiced holiday ale, like a brown spiced holiday ale. So that'll be fun once the weather cools off. I think it'll line up perfectly. By the time this stops fermenting, it'll be the end of July. We have 5 gallons that we have to drink, which will hopefully take us through August. And then in September, I'll brew another sort of holiday thing, and that should be ready by November, December. So hopefully that will all work out. I plan my brew days in advance because it's expensive to ship out here and it takes a long time, and yeah. So I will throw in now, hopefully, some time-lapse photos of our brew day. It did go really well. It's interesting because I don't brew very often. I find that every brew day I sort of start the day going, okay, how do I do this again? How do I brew? I don't remember. But the nice thing is the Anvil Foundry system, their little kind of maintenance catalog, you know, when you buy appliances, you get your little instruction manual, comes with like really good directions as far as water volume. So whether you're going to sparge or no sparge, whether you're running at 120 volts or 240 volts, like how much water you're going to need so that when things boil off, they kind of end up in the right place. Here in Okinawa, all of our houses are 110 volts, which means that it takes a little bit longer for me to get up to boil. And the boil doesn't end up huge. You know, it boils, but it's not this big, vigorous boil that's I'm constantly worried about boiling over. And because I'm using a bigger system, I have the capacity to boil a lot more water than I am. So it's really nice, really good. I always recommend, you know, in my vast knowledge as an expert brewer, get a bigger system than you need, and then you can grow into it if you want to make more, but also you don't have to worry about your stuff boiling over because you got lots of extra space. So speaking of my fermentation system here, so this is my kegerator, lovely bar top here. This piece on the front, it's a hops, and it's got our family motto on it. I had this custom vinyl printer done. I'm pretty sure it was an Etsy shop I got it from. And then of course we do not have Midnight Sun panty peeler in the keg right now, but I do love this tap handle, so it's often on there. And then here is my Inkbird system. So this is the temperature controller. All right, so this is the Inkbird temperature controller system, and what it has is a heating and cooling element. So I will plug the refrigerator itself into the cooling section, and then this is a heated blanket that goes around the fermentation vessel, and that will plug into the heating section. And then of course it has a little temperature probe, and I just tape that to the outside of the fermentation vessel, making sure that it's not underneath this heating blanket. And so then I can set this to whatever temperature I want it to stay within. It also sends me messages on my phone, so I can know if it gets out of range for some reason and maybe needs some attention. Alright, so the mash is done. Now we are going to start the boil. I have collected off about a gallon of wort, and so I'm going to start cooking that down as the instructions said, to kind of condense and caramelize. In the meanwhile, if you've never seen this Anvil Foundry system, this is the grain bin, which is now just sort of draining. And then what I'll do is I'll pull this whole bin, which is full of all the grains, out, and I will start the boil. All right, we've been boiling for about 30 minutes now. I wish you could smell the smell in this room. You can see behind me, it's super steamy and warm, and it just smells like delicious, delicious bread, malt goodness. Now that we are about 30 minutes into the boil, it's time to add our hop addition. So this is some UK East Kent Golden. And this is not an IPA, so very simple. All I do is for a 90-minute boil, we're going to add this at 30 minutes and get a 60-minute hop addition into this beer. All right, the boil is over, and now it is time to cool back down to temperature. So what I have in there is an immersion chiller. So the way this guy works is I have him hooked up to my faucet here. The cold water, we live in a warm place and it doesn't actually get very cold, but cold enough to get things started. So the cold water will come through here. We have clogged. All right, comes through here, swirls all around, and exchanges heat, and then the hot water runs back out to the tub. And I make use of this water, so what I'll do is I will clean all of my equipment while this is going on, so that hopefully it's not such a terrible waste of water. It does use quite a bit of water still. As you can see right now, we're sitting at about 124 degrees. I set the temperature there to 79 just to beep at me as we get down closer to temperature. So you can see it just dropped to 123, 122. It goes pretty quickly. Once we get to around 80, that's about as cold as I will get with our groundwater, the water coming out of the tap here. And then what I will do is transfer into my fermentation vessel, and then once I have cooled the pitching temperature, pitch the yeast and set it and forget it, I guess, for the remainder of about a week or two. I purposely didn't do my hair today because I knew I was going to be in this hot, steamy room and I was just going to end up with a frizz case anyway. But yeah, this room gets nice and sauna warm. You can see all the condensation on the walls and the mirrors. Smells delicious. Open the pores, do all the good things for you. My husband likes to experiment a lot with the different flavors of the beers, and he had the idea that maybe we could pitch some Scotch into our Scotch ale to make it a little more authentic. I think what we're going to do, since we've never experimented that way before, is instead of just throwing the Scotch into the beer, I'm afraid I just won't get the proportions right. So this will be a test batch, and what we'll do is for each glass of beer, we will add the Scotch to the beer as we drink it, and then we can figure out exactly the proportions that we want. And future batches, we can just put all that into the keg or the secondary to add flavor. But for now, this one will stay the way it is. And we're almost done, not too bad. We started at 8 a.m. It's now about 11:30. It's probably gonna take me another hour or so to get the beer down to pitching temperature and maybe even longer, probably 2 or 3 hours to get everything fully cleaned. While this is cooling down, what I'm going to do is rehydrate my yeast, and I'm going to take apart the kegerator, clean the keg lines, clean out the keg. The keg doesn't really need to be cleaned until fermentation is done, which is in a week or 2, but since I am fermenting inside the kegerator, there's no point in leaving a dirty keg sitting around to get gross. So we'll get into that now today. All right, we are now cooled down to 85 degrees and into the fridge we go. Those are the beer lines that get to get cleaned out really well, and the keg and CO2 tank. Here we go. All right, so here's the final setup. We have 63 degrees as our set point, so the suggested fermenting instructions say 60 to 65 degrees. And everything is taped in place, so this is the warming jacket, which I really don't think we'll end up using, taped around, and then over on the side, this is that little thermometer. So once this gets down to a cool enough temperature, we'll pitch our yeast, and then we can set it and forget it and kind of leave it alone for the next 2 weeks. So that is works in progress for this week. Oh gosh, okay. I guess that's a lie. I have been working on my Great Tapestry. There you go. Ta-da! I am about 100 rows in right now. It's about 350 rows for the whole project. I am thinking about that because I just ended my first set of yarn, ball of yarn. And so it took me 1 ball of each color to make this much space, which is pretty exciting. I keep looking at it and thinking maybe I should just call it a day and turn this into a skirt, wear it as a skirt. But no, I will persevere and push on. I'm thinking about, so there are some items that I've been thinking about making. They've been kind of dreaming about casting on. I always want to cast on new things, of course. And one of them is this beautiful, what's it called? It's a hexagon Afghan. I'll put a link, I'll put a picture up, but this beautiful, beautiful Afghan, it's garter stitch, and then it's got sort of cables, stockinette stitch cables over top of the garter stitch fabric, which makes for a really, really beautiful pattern. And the yarn is a Knit Picks yarn, Knit Picks Big O, which is a 50% superwash merino, 50% nylon. I haven't used that yarn before, but I think I will use it for this project. I talked about this over in the Ravelry group, but I've been spending a lot of time on the couch with the kittens, and as a result have lost a lot of skin on my legs from kittens having little kitten battles in my lap. So I've been wanting to knit something like a bigger blanket to put on the couch to protect my skin. But I feel a little bit guilty about putting another order in with Knit Picks so soon after putting in the order for that Great Tapestry. If I reach down here, you will see that I have, so on the top of course is my Malabrigo for my current project, but this entire thing is full of Knit Picks palette. Oh, there's my Grocery Girls card. I won a skein of yarn from Grocery Girls from their Sock Talk monthly thing. Anyway, so I have a giant container of Knit Picks yarn that I feel a little bit obligated to work my way through before I start ordering more Knit Picks yarn for a giant blanket. So I'm going to finish up my current project. I suspect that I ordered too much of this yarn. So I told you I'm about 1/3 of the way through my Great Tapestry, and it only took 1 skein of each color to get that far, and I still have this entire thing full of this yarn. But never fear, I have a backup plan. There were some very cute Fair Isle knit leggings that I have been wanting to make for a really long time that I think this will work perfectly for. So that's gonna hopefully be, ooh, sorry, noises. Hopefully gonna be the next project on my needles. Another project that I have been dreaming about doing is, I'm kind of going back and forth. You guys are familiar with my Starflake shawl by Stephen West. I know you are. You have seen me wear it many, 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 many times on this channel. And I made it out of this beautiful DK weight gradient yarn by, oh gosh, I think it's called the Seed Fiber Co. Or was it a Seed Pack by Fiber Co? I'll put some names in here. Anyway, beautiful gradient kit with lots of red. And I've been thinking about making another one with these guys. So I feel like if you are watching a small YouTube knitting channel such as my own, that you probably already are aware of Woolenvine and Kristen and her channel. But if you're not, go check out Kristen. She is the hand dyer of Woolenvine yarns. There you go. And I gotta tell you, her bases are just so beautiful and scrumptious. I've used her yarn for a couple of pairs of fiddlehead mittens in the past that I made for some of my friends. I got her yarn with the cashmere base. I can't remember the name of it right now. But this is the colorway Fairy Hair, which is on her Nouveau base, which is a 100% superwash merino. It's a single, so it's not plied. And then this is Solstice. Oh, I'm so in love with this color. Solstice in her Volca base, which is a superwash merino cashmere nylon 4-ply. Oh, lovely. And I have been considering making another one of the Starflake patterns in this yarn. I'm a little nervous that I might not have enough yarn because it's kind of a big pattern. But I have all of these lovely mini skeins. These are Madeline Tosh and they're singles that I think I could use to fill in some of those gaps if I needed to on that project. So I originally bought this Woolenvine yarn to make the Waiting for Rain shawl. If you haven't seen this pattern, it is just stunning. It's a garter stitch pattern with these sort of short row inlaid wedges of lace. And it's just beautiful. I love the kind of rusticness of a garter stitch paired with what I think of kind of a refined lace pattern. I just love the kind of play together. And initially I had wanted to get a really super woolen spun yarn to do the garter and then something really smooth and sleek to do the lace. But I was, you know, shopping the Woolenvine update as you do when you get the chance. And just saw those two colors together and thought that would be really perfect and snatched them up. So we'll see. These are maybe projects for the future. I love to share with you the things that are kind of catching my eye and getting my attention. And I have been posting them over to my group. So if you head over to the Hacks and Knits Ravelry group, you can see a whole bunch of blanket and Afghan patterns that I put up this week because that's what's been on my mind. So I think that's it for the knitting content this week. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about life here in Okinawa. Of course, you have to do the obligatory coronavirus update. So we had been many weeks coronavirus free, and that is no longer the case. I feel like I predict this. I mean, I guess it's not too hard to predict that you're not going to stay in this bubble forever, but last week I was like, oh yeah, this isn't going to last. So yeah, we do have the official Okinawa coronavirus tracking website is posting 1 new case, and then the Facebook groups are sort of scuttlebutting talking about a little cluster of about 5 new cases. So it's back, yay! It's kind of funny because we had just sort of started opening back up again. Because there was none on the island, which, you know, I think it was appropriate to be open when we've been 6 weeks of 0 cases of coronavirus. So of course that means that I am going to start my voluntary locking down pretty aggressively again. And for us, it will come. The lockdowns will come down the chute, but I definitely am very aware of it and conscious of it because it's here and we're in a small island and we're all kind of compact together. So a small island with a large population isn't a great option for coronavirus, as you know, some of the other parts of the world have discovered already. So that's it. I don't care to talk anymore about coronavirus. I think the whole world's done with it. Our house, so we do have new kittens. The kitten updates. So I think I mentioned So I know I mentioned in my previous episode that our Siamese kitten Siri had been unwell. I think we just got her with a cold or something, because indoor cats don't get sick, you know, they just stay indoors and never get sick. And we had done a first round of treatment with her. She had started to get better, and then she got a lot worse again. So we've been to the vet. She's getting antibiotics, antivirals, nebulizer treatments, fluids, all these things. Well, tell her. Thankfully, the veterinary care is very affordable. We've been going, we went daily for several days, and I think the most I paid was about $70 US dollars, like 780 yen, something like that. So very affordable, very kind and fast, and I don't know why the US can't do it that way, but that's the way it is. She is feeling much better now, so much so that she's romping around and causing general chaos in our life. She definitely pulled down my beer while I was brewing, not the beer that was boiling. Oh, thank God. I don't let her into the brew room. But I had a glass of beer in a lovely delirium beer tulip. Tulip is the stemmed glass that you drink beer out of. So that came down and shattered everywhere, and so I had beer, and good beer too. Isn't that the worst? Good beer. Beer and glass all over the place. But let's see. I think that's it. I think that's it for kitten casualties. She's actually been very well behaved. One of the kittens did chew on my new interchangeable needles, which was not as lovely. I don't know, I was forgiving of the beer glass, but the needles, I'm gonna probably buy some new cables, because that one cable got chewed on pretty well, and now I've learned my lesson to keep the new knitting needles far away from the kittens. Our previous cat, Taco, who passed away a few weeks ago, was well trained to stay out of the yarn and away from the knitting needles, and knew his place, but you know how kittens are. They get into everything, and they haven't learned what they are and aren't allowed to do yet, so whatever, it is what it is. I'm looking at my background. I'm set up a little bit differently than when I used to do this. All right, you guys can come with me. So one of my previous episodes, I think I was more at this angle, and here you can see into my house. And I have a confession to make that the last time I filmed this way, my husband was walking around down there, not knowing that I was filming in his underwear. And I got to do some clever editing in that video and just pop up pictures here from time to time, so that you could never mind the man behind the curtain there. But I was kind of hoping that when I filmed today, you might get some shots of the kittens bouncing around. You can see their little suction cup, oh gosh, how do I point at these? Suction cup window beds on the windows, which they absolutely love. So hopefully you'll get more kitten shots. The kittens don't come up here to my craft room very often because it isn't attached to my house. You have to go outside and across kind of an open air walkway. And our one cat, Siri, would very much love to go with us and wouldn't mind me picking her up and walking her across. But our other cat, Stoli, is not nearly as forgiving when it comes to being picked up and carried. And so I don't think she'll be over here in this room in the near future. There we go. But I think that is all for us today. As always, if you are interested in following me, you can see me on Instagram and Ravelry as Haxton Knits. If you are participating in my Challenge Yourself Make-Along, use the hashtag Haxton Knits MAL, so Haxton Knits Make-Along. As always, all of my make-alongs, whips are welcome, all crafts are welcome. Just find a way to make them fit into the challenge, and they're included. I'm not picky. I very much appreciate the fact that sometimes you are working on the perfect project before the make-along starts, and you really want to include it. And I want to see what you want to include because I think it's interesting, and we all grow and learn and get to experience new things together. If it weren't for this community of knitters, I wouldn't have found any of the projects that I've worked on. I wouldn't know the things I know today, and it's definitely the sharing that keeps it interesting, that keeps me wanting to keep coming back to new crafts and new patterns and new designers and new yarns. So I look forward to seeing all of your progress over there on that, over on my Ravelry group. Yep. So that is it for today, guys. I am so glad you decided to join me. I look forward to hearing from you. So if you've got comments, add them below, and I will talk to you next time. My sampler pack a little bit early. I had gotten myself some Delirium Red, which is a strong fruit beer. I like this one a ton. It's very easy to drink, 8% ABV. Which is probably the bottom of the barrel for us. We like our strong drinks. We also got some Delirium Christmas, which is a 10%. Yeah, I like the Delirium beers. I feel like they're good gateway beers to Belgian beers, and if you've never had, you know, if you have a relatively immature beer palate and you want to start exploring other beers, I like these guys. I also feel like Duvel is a good sort of gateway beer into the Belgian world. So this is a Belgian golden ale, and it's 8.5%, drinks really easy. I like this beer a lot. I know you already know about Orval because I talk about it frequently on my channel, but this one is delicious. This one has a little bit of sour content going on, so more a little hint of sourness. And I have some Westmalle, which is a Trappist triple, 9.5%. All good things. My husband beat me to this one. This is called Guillotine, La Guillotine. I had never had it before, but I did get a sip of his before it disappeared, and it was really, really tasty. Had a nice fruity flavor to it. Labels are difficult here, so here's the Japanese label plugged over top of the German label, maybe, or French, I can't tell. Anyway, but yeah, so that was my sampler pack with my Delirium and my La Guillotine, with my Orval and Westmalle and Duvel. We've also been drinking this guy. So this is Innocent Gun, and it's aged in Scotch whiskey barrels. I like this one a lot. I feel like these don't come to Okinawa a lot, so when they come in, we grab them really quickly and drink them really quickly. I know they also make a rum version, so this is the Scotch whiskey barrels, but they also make a rum version, which is really good. And last but not least is our Dragon's Milk, 11% ABV. Like I said, we like our strong beers here. So this is a bourbon barrel aged stout. Very good. Does not drink like an 11% beer. It's really surprisingly easy to drink, and will do the job nicely.